A naked female body, burned beyond recognition, was found near a riverside. The crime scene was extremely perplexing. Only the victim's footprints were present, with no other traces. How did the killer commit the crime? Did the woman take her own life? Or was she murdered? This was one of the most bizarre and complex real-life cases in Liaoyuan City, Jilin Province, China. In fact, the case featured shocking plot twists, rivaling those of gripping crime films. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to receive notifications for new videos. Around noon on July 26, locals discovered the charred, unclothed body of a woman near the floodplain of the Weijin River, on the southern outskirts of the city. Upon receiving the report, the police quickly arrived at the scene to conduct a forensic examination and investigate the case. The autopsy results showed that the victim was about 30 years old, over 1.6 meters tall, and had burns covering 80% of her body. Her face was severely burned beyond recognition. There were no signs of blunt force trauma on her head. The skin on her neck had peeled off, and there were no binding marks on her hands. Soot particles were found in her trachea and bronchi. The estimated time of death was around 11 p.m. on July 25. Not far from the body, police discovered two scorched areas reeking of gasoline, one in a cornfield and the other by the riverside. At the scene, they also found partially burned clothing fragments scattered on the ground. Based on the burned area, the police estimated that at least 5 liters of gasoline had been used. However, no gas cans or containers were found nearby. Instead, they discovered a single women's sandal near the burned area, surrounded by several small crescent-shaped depressions in the ground. After comparing the evidence, police confirmed that the sandal's size matched the victim's foot perfectly. The crescent-shaped depressions were identified as the woman's footprints, left before her death. If the victim had been murdered, there should have been traces of the perpetrator. Yet, no second set of footprints or signs of a struggle were found at the scene. After searching the area, investigators soon located the other sandal about 20 meters away by the riverbank. This discovery left the police puzzled. If this was a case of self-immolation, why were the two sandals found in different locations? Based on the crime scene analysis, police theorized that before her death, the victim waded across the river from the opposite bank, reached the area near the cornfield, and set herself on fire there. As the flames engulfed her, the excruciating pain caused her to panic and run toward the riverbank. However, she collapsed before getting far, creating the first burned area. She then attempted to stand up and continue running, but fell again, succumbing to the fire before she could reach the water. After investigating the scene and conducting forensic examinations, most officers believed this was a case of suicide. However, Officer Sun, who was in charge of the case, pointed out several inconsistencies and unresolved contradictions, leaving many questions unanswered. The most critical issue was the method of self-immolation. Officer Sun argued that this was one of the most painful and horrific ways to die. If the victim truly intended to end her life, she could have chosen a less agonizing method. This raised serious doubts about the true nature of the incident. Moreover, the police did not find any gasoline containers at the scene. The first burn site was 11 meters away from the riverbank, making it illogical for the victim to have set herself on fire and then carried the gasoline container to the river. Would anyone have the strength and presence of mind to do such a thing while being consumed by flames? Even if someone had thrown the gasoline container into the river to destroy evidence, a light object like that wouldn't have drifted far, as the water flow at the scene was very slow. This raised suspicions that someone had deliberately removed the gasoline container to erase traces of the crime. After Officer Sun presented these two key doubts, the police chief decided to hand over the entire case to him for further investigation. Operating under the assumption that this was a homicide, Officer Sun and his team began a more thorough examination of the crime scene. However, He had no idea that this case would be far more complex and riddled with mysteries than he had imagined. Once he took over the case, Officer Sun quickly returned to the crime scene to continue the investigation. However, the first major challenge he faced was that the scene had already been severely disturbed. Due to the presence of a dead body, a large crowd of villagers gathered to watch, severely compromising crucial evidence. The curiosity of the onlookers unintentionally obscured important clues that the police needed. While carefully examining the scene, Officer Sun unexpectedly discovered a faint male footprint at the burn site. However, with so many villagers trampling over the area, he couldn't determine whether the footprint belonged to the perpetrator or a curious bystander. At that time, forensic technology was still underdeveloped, and the police had to rely solely on their eyes and hands to meticulously scan every centimeter of the ground. Their diligence finally paid off when they discovered a single women's sock in a sweet potato field about 50 meters from the crime scene. Strangely, during the initial examination, this sock had not been present. The investigative team believed it belonged to the victim, but the question remained: why was it so far from the scene, and why would the victim take it off there? After careful consideration, Officer Sun theorized that the victim might have been threatened before her death. During a struggle with the killer, the sock could have been pulled off. If this theory was correct, it would confirm that this was a murder case. However, to officially classify it as homicide, the police needed more evidence. The most crucial step was identifying the victim. But since the body was burned beyond recognition, determining her identity posed a significant challenge to the investigators. At the time, DNA identification technology was not yet advanced, making it extremely difficult to trace the victim's identity. To expedite the process, authorities rode bicycles over 20 kilometers daily to neighboring towns to gather information. For days, no one in the surrounding villages recognized the victim. Then, the police station received a phone call. The caller was a man named Zhao, who reported that his younger sister, Liaoyuan, had been missing for several days. Based on Zhao's description, the police noticed striking similarities between his sister and the burned body found by the river. To confirm, they showed Zhao the victim's sandals and socks recovered from the scene. After examining them, Zhao confirmed that both items belonged to his sister. According to Zhao, the last time he saw his sister was on July 25. She had asked him to watch her daughter because she was experiencing stomach pain and wanted to visit a doctor.
我问他谁带你去的，他说我厂子的同事。我说那么晚你还敢回来吗？他说同事的对象和我一起去的。我又问他用不用我去接，他说不用，他俩送我，你放心吧，我走了。当时我也相信了。
However, after that night, she never returned to pick up her daughter. Upon learning this clue, the police immediately investigated and verified the only clinic in town. But when they questioned the doctor, he confirmed that no patients had come in on the night of the 25th. If the victim never went to the doctor, did something happen to her on the way, or had she lied to her brother? Why did Zhao Xiaolian go out at night and hide it from her family? Who did she meet? The victim worked at a textile factory in the city, while her husband, Li Shangdong, worked at the Liaoning Supply and Marketing Cooperative. After investigating, the police found nothing suspicious. Her family had no known conflicts with anyone, and their financial situation was stable. However, while searching the couple's home, they found a diary in which Zhao Xiaolian expressed dissatisfaction with her marriage. The last entry, written on July 24, one day before she went missing, blamed her husband for secretly transferring to Changchun for work without telling her. Based on this, Officer Sun suspected that tensions in their marriage could have played a role in her death. They began to suspect that her husband might be responsible and decided to investigate him. But to their shock, he had also disappeared. Determined to solve the case quickly, the police concluded that they needed to find Li Xiangdong to understand what had happened between the couple. At the time, communication was mainly through letters or telegrams, yet Li Xiangdong had made no contact with his family since leaving home and unusual behavior. After further investigation, the police were stunned to discover that he had never been officially transferred to Changchun. Moreover, he hadn't shown up for work in over 10 days. Where had he gone? Why did Zhao Xiaolian believe her husband had moved to Changchun? While struggling for answers, the police learned that the wife had heard about her husband's transfer from someone else. This detail was revealed by her brother. At the same time, Li Xiangdong's colleagues provided a critical lead. Someone had seen him in Shenyang with an unidentified woman. Who was this mysterious woman? Could she have been the reason behind the marital conflict between the victim and her husband? When the police searched Li Xiangdong's office, they found a photograph of a woman inside his desk drawer. It turned out that the woman in the photo was Li Xiangdong's first love. After their breakup, she had married and moved to Shenyang. When investigators arrived in Shenyang, they were shocked to learn that this woman hadn't seen Li Xiangdong in years. Moreover, she had no knowledge of his recent whereabouts. The police had to shift their investigation to find out what Li Xiangdong had been doing before he disappeared and who had last seen him. According to his friends, on July 20, Li Xiangdong met his friend Xiao Gao for a drinking session. Xiao Gao and several others confirmed this, but later that night, Li suddenly said he had urgent business and left. That same night, someone told Zhao Xiaolian that her husband had gone to Changchun, and after that, no one saw Li Xiangdong again. However, police discovered that there were no night trains to Changchun on the night of his disappearance. The case grew increasingly complicated, as searching for him was like finding a needle in a haystack. Just as the investigation hit a dead end, his wife murdered and his whereabouts still unknown, Officer Sun was assigned 2 new cases. What he didn't expect was that these new cases would be connected to Zhao Xiaolian's murder and her husband's mysterious disappearance. The first case involved the theft of 8 tons of steel from a construction company in Shenyang in March of that year. Strangely, the thieves had burned all the purchase receipts, leading the company director to suspect an inside job. The second case was a burned body discovered in tin handling. A witness reported seeing 4 masked men transporting a man on a tractor to a remote area, dousing him in gasoline and setting him on fire. Based on the description, the victim was highly likely to be Li Xiangdong. Furthermore, the method of murder was identical to Zhao Xiaolian's case, and the crime scene was nearby. By the time police arrived at the scene, the flames had completely consumed the body, leaving only bones. After examining the victim's teeth, the forensic doctor confirmed that the deceased's age closely matched that of the missing Li Xiangdong. However, due to the limited technology at the time, they could not definitively determine whether the body belonged to the missing Li Xiangdong. As a result, the police could only follow the tractor tracks, which led them to a nearby coal mine. But the mine manager stated that the deceased was a miner who had fallen into a shaft and died, not Li Xiangdong. According to local customs, those who fell into a well were not allowed to be buried in a cemetery. Their bodies had to be taken to the mountaintop for cremation. This meant that the burned male body was not Li Xiangdong, and the investigation into Zhao Xiaolian's murder once again hit a dead end. Determined to catch the killer, the police devised a plan to lure the culprit into revealing a mistake. Since they had kept Zhao Xiaolian's death a secret, they instructed her family to spread only the news of her disappearance, hoping to draw out the murderer. Sure enough, within days, Zhao Xiaolian's younger sister found a letter left on her windowsill. The letter was signed by the missing Li Xiangdong and claimed that the couple was safe and that nothing had happened to them. Just as the investigators had anticipated, the killer had fallen into their trap. The next step for the police was to determine whether the handwriting in the letter truly belonged to Li Xiangdong. After examining it, Li's family confirmed that the letter had not been written by him. This meant that the person who wrote the letter was likely the murderer of Zhao Xiaolian. The police theorized that the killer must have been someone familiar with both the husband and wife, possibly a friend, colleague, or neighbor. Therefore, one team of officers quietly collected handwriting samples from Zhao Xiaolian and Li Xiangdong's family, friends, and co-workers. Meanwhile, another team investigated visitors to Zhao Xiaolian's home by questioning her brother and sister. During the interrogation, Zhao's family revealed that before the incident, a construction company had approached Zhao Xiaolian for inquiries. This was the same Xiangyang construction company that had reported the theft of steel. When police met with the head of Xiangyang Construction, they uncovered a crucial lead. It turned out that before the incident, Li Xiangdong was suspected of being involved in the missing 8 tons of steel, so the construction company had visited his home to verify. At that time, Zhao Xiaolian told them that her husband had gone to Changchun. The 8 tons of steel had been handed over to her husband by Zhang Zhigang, the head of the Xiangyang Construction Company. When the police contacted Zhang Zhigang, they found him to be extremely secretive, revealing no useful information. After analyzing his handwriting, they confirmed that he was not the one who wrote the letter sent to Zhao Xiaolian's family. At the same time, an unexpected letter brought a major shift in the investigation. Li Xiangdong's colleagues received a letter addressed to him after his disappearance, so they handed it over to Officer Sun. The letter was written by Wang Shud from the Erking Labor Services Company in Changchun. It stated that the invoice Li Xiangdong had provided was for beer, which the finance department couldn't process, so he needed to submit an invoice for steel pipes instead. Did this mean that the missing 8 tons of steel had been sold to this company? But why had Li Xiangdong given them a beer invoice instead of a steel pipe invoice? Since the letter included the company's address, Officer Sun immediately traveled to Changchun to investigate. Wang Shud told the police that he had met Li Xiangdong by chance on a train. After that, they had no further contact until one day Li suddenly wrote to him, saying he had 8 tons of steel and asking if they were interested. Upon learning about such a large amount of steel, Wang immediately informed his company, which decided to purchase it on the spot. However, after the purchase, Li Xiangdong gave them a beer invoice instead, so they sent him a letter requesting a correction. Li also told them that Zhang Zhigang from Xiangyang Construction still had a lot of steel, and they could contact him if they needed more. Zhang Zhigang, again, his relationship with Li was clearly not simple. At this point, the police started thinking about the person who had visited Zhao Xiaolian that night. That person had met her at night, but aside from her 7-year-old daughter, no one else had seen him. The police had no choice but to gather photos of Zhang Zhigang and all his colleagues and show them to the little girl for identification. As expected, Zhao's daughter recognized a man, Hu Liaoyuan, the warehouse keeper of Xiangyang Construction Company. However, after verifying the handwriting, the letter was not written by Hu Liaoyuan. If neither Zhang nor Hu wrote the letter, then who forged it and sent it to the victim's family? After multiple handwriting comparisons, the police found a match: Kong Donglin. Kong Donglin was Hu Liaoyuan's cousin, and the two were very close. When the police found Kong Donglin, he quickly admitted to writing the letter, but he claimed that Hu Liaoyuan had asked him to do it. However, under police interrogation, Hu Liaoyuan confessed that the entire scheme had been orchestrated by Zhang Zhigang. The stolen steel was resold using delivery receipts provided by Zhang Zhigang to Li Xiangdong. After selling the steel in Changchun, Zhang Zhigang instructed Li Xiangdong to leave Liaoyuan to avoid exposure. Zhao Xiaolian was murdered because Zhang Zhigang feared she knew too much about the steel deal. Zhang was the one who arranged to meet Zhao and tied her hands with a rope by the riverside. Knowing she was about to be killed, Zhao pleaded with Zhang for her life, but it was futile. Before killing her, he sexually assaulted her and then doused her in gasoline and set her on fire. After Hu Liaoyuan's confession, the police immediately arrested Zhang. However, Officer Sun still felt something was off. He decided to re-examine the details of the case and piece everything together. When Zhao Shaolian's body was found, the forensic report indicated that she had not been tied up. But Hu Leiqiang had claimed that Zhang Zhigang had tied her hands with a rope. Moreover, after being arrested, Zhang denied selling the steel and insisted he had nothing to do with Zhao's murder. After multiple interrogations, Hu Leiqiang finally revealed a shocking truth. In reality, the theft of the 8 tons of steel was not planned by Zhang Zhigang. It was orchestrated by Hu Leiqiang. Li Shangdong and Kong Donglin were his accomplices. After successfully selling the stolen steel, Hu Leiqiang became anxious that the crime would be exposed. So he devised a plan to frame Zhang Zhigang as the perfect scapegoat. To make Zhang take the fall, he instructed Li Xiangdong and his wife to claim that Zhang Zhigang had given them the steel. However, Hu still felt uneasy, fearing that Li Xiangdong might reveal the truth. On July 20, he arranged to meet Li at a small coal mine. Taking advantage of the situation, he struck Li Xiangdong on the head with a hammer and threw him into a coal pit. But Li didn't die instantly. He screamed in pain. Hearing the cries, Hu picked up stones and hurled them into the pit repeatedly until the screaming stopped. After killing Li Xiangdong, he went to Zhao Shaolian's home and told her that her husband had left for Changchun on a work assignment. In reality, Hu hadn't initially planned to kill Zhao, but when the construction company started investigating, he feared she would expose everything. On July 25, he asked a driver for a can of gasoline and placed it in a dormitory. He then lured Zhao Shaolian out by telling her that Li Xiangdong had returned and wanted to meet her in private. Since she had to cross the river, Zhao removed her socks, stuffed them into her pocket, and waded through the water with him. However, once they reached the other side, Hu suddenly stopped and revealed his true intentions for killing her. Realizing the danger, Zhao tried to flee, losing one of her sandals in the process. But due to her weaker physical strength, she was quickly caught. As she desperately pleaded for her life, Hu made a cruel demand. He would spare her if she spent the night with him. In a desperate bid to survive, Zhao agreed. Afterward, he led her toward the cornfield. Believing that he had let her go, Zhao lowered her guard. But suddenly, he strangled her until she lost consciousness and then set her on fire. The agony from the flames caused Zhao to wake up. Acting on survival instinct, she ran toward the river, but she was burned alive before she could reach the water. There were no footprints left by Hu Leiqiang at the crime scene because he was wearing flat-soled shoes. The soft riverbank soil retained only the victim's footprints, as she had been wearing heeled sandals. After murdering Zhao Shaolian, Hu feared that any notes left behind by Li Xiangdong might reveal the truth, so he retrieved and burned them during the night. Throughout the entire case, Hu Leiqiang did everything he could to cover up his crimes. But he never expected that the police would leave no stone unturned. The murderer, who thought he had gotten away with everything, was finally captured. A year after the murder, in 1985, Hu Leiqiang was sentenced to death. The case of the mystery behind the burned body by the river has now come to a close. Share your thoughts, emotions, and opinions about this story in the comments below. That's the end of this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps us continue bringing you more intriguing content. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.